What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Taking the Pin podcast. We're back for another episode, and this one is a pretty special one, if I do say so myself. We have the Royal Rumble to recap, as well as, of course, a couple of other shows. So let's get straight into it. Bragster, how are you doing? How are you today?
I'm great. Obviously, the Royal Rumble's just been. I mean, the big question, I think, which is going to be in the title, but is this the best Rumble pay-per-view ever? Is not just a question for the podcast. This has been a genuine question that has been posed all over social media, which I guess is mini spoilers for our review of going through the show. But that just shows how strong that show was.
Absolutely.
It's been a very long time since we've had a Rumble overall pay-per-view that has been this strong. Whether you agree with the decisions or not, which we'll go into later, ultimately, it was such a strong pay-per-view from start to finish. The 3.5, 4 hours just flew by.
Yeah.
4 hours. I think it might have even been 4.5 hours, actually. It just flew by. It just didn't, and it's exactly what you want from a Rumble pay-per-view. And yeah, I mean, Christmas for wrestling fans actually delivered this time.
Absolutely.
So yes, I'm a very happy man, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think the Rumble itself, I mean, I know we'll go into a bit more review later, but it's like you say, it was one of those where it had a lot of hype going in, and I think for the most part, it matched it for me personally. Obviously, we'll see what each other thinks of it once we get into the full review. But from there, yeah, let's get into it. Let's go into the roundup of the week.
Yes.
Not going to cover SmackDown
No.
today because not really need to.
It's pointless because it's just build to the Rumble, and the Rumble's the big point, and then Raw.
Rumble's the main course, yeah. So
Yes.
and then Raw's the dessert after to give us a tease of what's coming next. So I'm gonna let you take the reins here, Bragster, and you can get into AEW Dynamite and Collision.
Yes, we'll run through both of them, and then we can sort of just focus on the Rumble portion of the entire episode before answering the big question at the end.
Yeah.
But this week's AEW started off really nicely, actually. It immediately kicked off with Ospreay's music. There was almost no intro from the commentary. That was almost the theme of the week, actually. It seemed like AEW just wanted to pack the shows with as much stuff as possible. We'll cover later. They didn't need to. Didn't need to do this, but it was nice touch. It just made you feel like, oh, we're starting off hot. It was Ospreay versus Brian Cage. Omega was taken out backstage before the match even began, and that was shown on the big Tron by Don Callis. Again, just putting over the fact that Don Callis is a horrible, horrible human being. It's a lovely back and forth match, this one. It was really well done. Brian Cage is one of those annoying wrestlers in the nicest way, right? And this is not me criticizing Brian Cage. It's actually the complete opposite. Brian Cage is his own detriment, that he is so good at making his opponents look good, that he is such a utility person that he's going to lose the majority of his matches, despite the fact that he is so athletically impressive, physically impressive, that he's just going to lose a lot of his matches because he makes his opponents look so good. And he did it again here with Ospreay. He did it previously with Omega, obviously, and did it again here. It's just brilliant. It's just brilliant from start to finish. You know, you got the flippy stuff, and then you would have Brian Cage just take him down, and ground him. But Brian Cage does it in a way that is very impressive to watch, where he's not just, as we'll cover later on with the Raw review, with A Certain Love with Kaiser, does it very differently in just, I'm going to slap you silly and that's going to stop you. In this one, it's very much like he'll stop you, but with a really impressive move and a really impressive counter in reverse of it. It's very cleverly done. These two clearly have good chemistry. Wouldn't be surprised if we see them in the ring before Grand Slam comes about. But Will Ospreay wins with the Styles Clash. He seems to be winning with that a lot recently, which is, again, really nice to see. I love the Styles clashes and moves, so I love to see it being put over. And then obviously Don Callis family attack after the match, attack Ospreay, despite the fact that Ospreay won the match. Omega comes down for the save, obviously still beaten up though. They both get beaten up, and then there's this lovely moment that while Omega's getting pounded and like kicked in the gut, obviously surgery and stuff being a big factor here, Ospreay crawls over Omega and puts his body over the top of him to protect him, and it almost basically saying to the Callis family, hit me instead of him.
Mm-hmm.
Really nice, really shows that their relationship is sort of developing between Ospreay and Omega, and just a really nice progression of everything. Then I wrote down there's been multiple Hangman and MJF interactions recently. So we cut backstage to Hangman just going berserk, like looking everywhere. We don't know who he's looking for, so that will probably be followed up on at some point. And then it goes to MJF, and they kind of get a word from him on Jarrett, and he's kind of like, well, I'm not going to say I told you so, but, you know, I said what was coming, and it happens to Jarrett. So, you know, but there's been a lot of recently backstage while MJF or Hangman are giving their backstage promos, there's been interactions between the two of them. Mm-hmm. Don't know what that's building to necessarily, but I think it's interesting because you know it's going to go somewhere. Yeah. You just don't know where yet.
Yeah.
Then we have Jarrett versus Claudio. Yes, we have Jarrett versus Claudio. Sorry, my brain just completely died on me there. Because I skipped forwards a little bit, but basically MJF was like, Jarrett's going to lose. He's going to need me. Because I skipped to a later mini promo that happened. Then Jarrett and Claudio go head to head. Numbers game costs Jarrett this, that, and the other. You know, classic sort of what you would expect. Numbers game get the better. Jarrett gets distracted. Claudio wins. Everyone sort of saw it coming. Like,
yeah,
it's just what you would expect. Because unless Jarrett was going to be the match at Grand Slam for Moxley, kind of didn't see at all this happening, because it's not going to be the match at Revolution, because we find out later on what the match at Revolution is going to be. Surprise, surprise, it's a certain somebody with 4 letters. Then, but the commentary sort of put over while Jarrett's sort of getting up that this could be his last chance. This could be it. This, you know, Jarrett may not have it anymore. You know, he's at the end of his tether. He's at the end of his career. What's Jarrett going to do? Like, this is it for him. And then MJF comes out. And then he absolutely clatters Jeff Jarrett. And then he grabs the mic and goes, look, Jarrett, while Jarrett is on the floor because of MJF, goes, look, Jarrett, I'm sorry, man. Like, you know, he's like, I respect my elders. And I'm not going to do what everyone's expecting me to come out and say, and that's, I told you so. But what happened is exactly what I said would happen. So he basically says, I told you so, without saying I told you so. It's really, obviously much better worded than I could ever do. But it was so well done. Again, it's just going to build this whole thing with Jeff Jarrett and MJF is so interesting, and it's just going to build and build and build and build and build. Wouldn't mind it being a Revolution match, to be honest. I think that the build has been that good that it could genuinely be that, and also gets MJF on the card. Then we move into Ricochet versus AR Fox. Now, it was said on commentary that Swerve Strickland wasn't allowed to interfere. If he interferes, he loses the match with Ricochet next week. So therefore, we knew, okay, we haven't got to worry about Swerve for the rest of this match and could just enjoy it. And again, similar to last week with Swerve and AR Fox, it's a very back and forth match, very flippy doos going around, you know, Ricochet being Ricochet.
Yeah.
Also, Ricochet pulling out the people's moonsault at one point, which was a lot of fun. You also had at one point him pretending to go for a suicide dive and then stopping, to which the fans responded by booing and then going bold, 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 which is one of the funniest AEW chants at the moment is just them just chanting every time someone is bold, and just telling them that they're bold every time. Ricochet eventually wins, eventually picks up the win. He then, after the match, picks up the scissors that he previously attacked Swerve with to go and attack AR Fox with. But surprise, surprise, now the match is over. Swerve Strickland takes him out and completely decimates Ricochet on the outside of the ring and then walks away. Again, build into their match really well. There's another promo that we'll come to later on Collision that again just builds to it more and more and more. Then we cut backstage to what is everyone's favorite segment, and that is the New York Minute with the Learning Tree. We all love the Learning Tree.
We all love the Learning Tree.
I wouldn't mention this again. Usually, it's really funny because I say I wouldn't usually mention these 1 minute promos because I don't. But every single time, Jericho is very clever, and you know, whether you like him or not, he's very, very clever, and he always puts something in there that makes me then have to talk about it because it's important. And that is that he basically says that, you know, Powerhouse Hobbs isn't here tonight. There was a promo package with Powerhouse Hobbs during this show as well, with him basically saying, I couldn't make it tonight. Doctors couldn't clear me, but when they can, I'll be back. And he basically says, yes, you took out, well done. You took out Powerhouse Hobbs, but I told you to take him out forever. And you haven't done that, have you, Big Bill? You've disappointed me. And again, slowly building to this Big Bill turn that will eventually happen and will cause the biggest pop of all time because the crowd love Big Bill. Yeah. But it's sort of, again, just saying he's not done good enough. And then they set up them, Jericho and Brian Keith. There we go. His name slipped me for a second. Versus the Outrunners for Collision. Then we go into Jay White versus Wheeler Yuta. God, it's just the roster sometimes is just stacked where you've got Jay White and Wheeler Yuta not in the main event picture. Well, technically they are because they're involved in the faction warfare type thing going on. Yeah. But they are not the people competing for the main title, and yet they can put on an absolute banger of a match, which is exactly what they go and do. And it starts off really, really well by, as Jay White's there taking off his jacket, you know, as you do to start a match, Wheeler Yuta comes in to like basically take him out at the start of the match like the Death Riders usually do. And Jay White grabs him and nearly hits the switchblade straight away. Immediately, as a fan, you're just like, okay, they are not pulling their punches. This is starting hot. And it just continues that way for the entirety of the match. It's just moves on the outside of the ring. They're just going berserk. Like what I love about White and Yuta is that their sort of style is fast paced, but everything, it's not just, oh, we're going to do some flips. It's fast paced, but it's not flips. If that makes any sense at all, it's just good technical wrestling. Everything is thought through. Everything is like, okay, I want to beat my opponent, but I want to beat them quickly. That's sort of more their sort of style, and I really like that. Yeah. The commentary team put over that Wheeler Yuta is kind of the whipping boy of the Death Riders, and again, that's another point that they make on Collision, which is in a match that is set up at the end of this one. But the commentary team are really putting over that Yuta's the whipping boy. Now, if we harken back to when the Death Riders first started and they attacked Bryan Danielson, Yuta was the one that wasn't fully convinced with moving over. I feel like Yuta's going to be the one that turns and causes maybe Moxley to lose the title. There's something there that I feel like it's, again, similar to the MJF Hangman stuff earlier on. It's not a coincidence that the commentary team keep saying this, because at some point it's going to pay off. White eventually wins with the Switchblade. He then picks Yuta up and does another Switchblade straight after the match. You know, not very face-like, but what I like, and especially in wrestling at the moment, is a lot of tweenery sort of roles where he is on the face side of things, but ultimately is still not a very nice man.
Yeah.
He still doesn't care. If he doesn't like you, he'll beat you up after the match. Very similar to Swerve, actually, who hasn't really changed since being a heel. Then the Death Riders end up obviously attacking Jay White, and then Cope and FTR both come for the save, and we kind of get FTR on the mic, and they set out a challenge to a Mid-South street fight on Collision, FTR versus the Death Riders. We then find out later on in the night that those two Death Riders are the AEW World Champion Jon Moxley and Wheeler Yuta, which is quite an interesting little pairing. Nice to see Moxley back in the ring. We'll go back to that later. Then we have a Mariah May promo. It's very basic. Just basically says that she's going to beat Tony. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Then this is what I mean by the show doesn't have to start that hot, right? Is we then had, and written here, a lot. I just wrote, I was like, there's a lot of promo packages and like mini promos for different wrestlers and stuff. There's just a lot of like either recap packages or packages building something, or just a quick like 1 minute backstage promo saying how this team's really good or this person's really good. And then I looked at the time of which that had been going on for. Over 10 minutes of my time was wasted watching recap package after recap package after promo package after promo. Because I was just sat there, and when you're just watching and you're like, this feels like this has been going on a while. And then I timed it, and I was like, this is insane. Like, they could have easily have spreaded those throughout the show, and it wouldn't have been noticeable. It just felt like they were either going under on time, or they hadn't thought through things, but it really derailed the momentum of the show. Yeah. Because at that point, I was like, I'm bored, because there's only so many promo packages you can take before you get bored.
But it's like that's the thing. I mean, I know back in the day when Vince was in charge of WWE, like those sort of packages were left, right, and center and filled up a lot of time, and you'd often have entire segments of 3-hour Raws, like that 10-15 minute segments, which were back to back to back, recapping earlier stuff or recapping stuff from the pay-per-view, or reminding you that a certain wrestler who's not been seen for a while is still here. And it's kind of like, it's all well and good when they're used sparingly, but when you use them in such a big chunk of time, and when, again, like you say, you noticed it does become hard to get through when you're watching it, and it does become noticeable to the person watching it, I guess.
Well, yeah, exactly. The joy of the promo packages is to break up the show, and as a fan, I'm not supposed to notice. I know I'm sat here writing notes about the show and stuff like that, but there's, as I said previously, to do with the Jericho segment, I don't usually, when there's 1 minute quick packages, I don't write it down, because I'm like, okay, this is just a throwaway segment. There's no reason for me to write this down unless something ends up happening. The reason I noticed anyway was because I usually got it on in the background, and then I'll write down my notes as we go along. I hadn't written anything for a long time, and that's how I ended up noticing. And then it still went on for an extra 4 or 5 minutes after that. It was, I noticed as me, and then it carried on. It's not like I noticed and then it stopped. Like, so the everyday person is naturally going to notice that, and it's naturally going to be frustrating, because you're going to feel like you're wasting your time, and you don't want to feel like that at any point, especially up to this point. The show was really good. Yeah. And yet this is the thing that I'm now ranting about, and this is the thing I partly remember about the show. Yeah. If you ask me what I remember about this show, part of it will be the 10-15 minutes of random promo packages and promoting Collision. And it's frustrating, because it's like, that is not the point of this show. When there are so many good things, why is that the thing I remember? It's frustrating. Frustrating. Especially then when you're going into the main event of the evening. Yeah. After this was the main event, which is why I was like, maybe they've gone under on time. I don't know why. But we went into Mercedes Moné versus Yuka Sakazaki. Mercedes got booed in the intro of like like Mercedes Moné, and then Yuka Sakazaki. Yuka Sakazaki also didn't get loads of support in that, so it's not like this is not me hitting out on Mercedes.
Yeah.
Mercedes got the crowd reaction they obviously want with Mercedes, which is said to be booed. But then Yuka Sakazaki then didn't get the reaction that they wanted. But contrary to that, she then did get the reaction that they wanted about 2 or 3 minutes into the match, where you've got Yuka being literally, the crowd are just going, Yuka. So they did eventually.
Once you get into it, yeah.
Once you got into it, but obviously, as we all know, when you're doing the championship matches and you have the ring announcers announcing the people, you kind of want one to get cheered and one to get booed, or both to get cheered. And you have that reaction. So as a fan watching it, you're invested. It took that extra couple of minutes, I think, to get going, because as a fan, without getting that reaction, you're there like, okay, cool. A lot of the early stages of this match was Yuka Sakazaki actually getting the better of Mercedes Moné. Mercedes would go for her usual moves. Yuka would swipe the legs or move out the way last minute or quick reversal. It very much seemed like Yuka had done her homework, and commentary were putting that on. Like, yes, Yuka looks all nice and, she looks all happy-go-lucky, but there is a very good professional wrestler that is there and who understands and studies her opponents. And you really felt that during the match. It was really well done. And then you could just put on some really good comedy moments by, there was just these little interactions where she'd get the better of Mercedes and then would be like, ha ha ha. And like these really, and it, like, obviously it's not so funny when I do it, but when Yuka does it, she does it in this like really fun, clever way where, it's almost like, I've got the better of you again, and I've got the better of you again, and and it just kept going and going, and to the point where Mercedes, when she got the upper hand, just like mocked Yuka's laugh and was just like, hey, you haven't got the better of me now, have you? And it's like, it was really, really well told in the middle of the match to have this little mini comedy thing in the mix of an actual back and forth battle between the two of them. Honestly, Yuka got the most offense in this match, which is a really really nice way of making Yuka seem like a big deal. Unfortunately, from someone who's watched AEW for a while, knows that Yuka is just a throwaway title match, knows this isn't going to be followed up on, despite the fact that they, the whole reason why you would have Yuka get the majority of the offense is so you follow that up and go, okay, Yuka then is trying to build a way back up to get another title shot or something like that. I just know that she's going to be forgotten about for a few weeks or a month or so until they need another need another opponent again randomly. Which is a shame. Mercedes did eventually get the win, did eventually hit her finisher, and she did retain, and that is how the show sort of closed. Overall, a good show. It wasn't the most outstanding Dynamite show in recent weeks. I've obviously talked up Dynamite massively. This week was very much, it was a good show, solid, nothing to write home about. Obviously the annoyance with the promo packages and stuff, but the matches themselves were good. I just feel like maybe I think they were right to go with the main event being the title match. I really like that, but it felt like a lot of these matches didn't have much riding on them. Apart from the Jarrett match, but we kind of knew where the Jarrett match was going to go. So Ospreay Cage doesn't really matter. White Yuta doesn't really matter. Mercedes Moné isn't going to lose her title to Yuka Sakazaki. No offense. So it was a lot of just filler material. It sort of felt like to me, but overall, a good show.
Good. That's good.
Collision.
I mean, it's a consistent run for Dynamite, isn't it? Like that's
yeah.
You not every week is going to be a 10 out of 10, and not every week. Again, you're not aiming for every week to be an okay, decent show.
Yeah.
But if you have a good blend of them consistently, then it means they're doing something right, and that's what you want to see.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I feel like, especially on Rumble week, it might actually be clever of them to put their weaker show now. Like, Why not the week that no one's going to be speaking about? You could put on the best Dynamite show possible, but in wrestling, when it's Rumble week, no one's going to talk about you. Let's be honest, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's sort of the same as when, AEW have their big all-out pay-per-view or Double or Nothing or whatever. Full damn well that a lot of WWE in the general wrestling sphere is just going to disappear for the week.
Yeah.
That's just going to happen. And it's almost like they knew, and I could be wrong, but it felt a little bit like they knew that. So kind of put their filler matches that sort of progress the stories without doing anything big on this show now. So then next week they can pack out the show a little bit more and progress the stories a bit more on a week where more of us are going to be actually speaking about the show.
Yeah.
Prime example is, quite frankly, what are we doing on a podcast where we review the weekly shows? We're getting rid of AEW before speaking about the Rumble.
Yeah.
Because that's what everyone wants to do. So, it very much just felt like they understood that was going to be the case this week. And as you said, the fact that they still put on a solid show that I still enjoyed says that they're on a good train.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about Collision then?
Collision started off with Samoa Joe and Hook versus Kip Sabian and Nick Wayne. This is very much the start of it, was the patriarchy sort of on top. It started off with Hook and Joe, getting the better of things as they should. Patriarchy then do some heelish tactics, get the better, and then they're on top throughout the whole match. They're beating down Hook. Now, what you would expect in this match is, as time goes on, is you would build to the hot tag, and then the hot tag would lead to stuff, and then you'll lead to a big ending. Didn't really happen. At one point, Kip Sabian, I think, accidentally kind of got the pin on Hook. The referee was distracted with Samoa Joe, and I think the referee was distracted for a little too long, because you could pretty much count 1, 2, 3 in the time that they were gone, which is not very much what you want the heels to have happen to the heels.
Yeah.
Because it felt really off, because obviously the referee's getting distracted by Samoa Joe, who's a face. The face is getting pinned, and kind of was pretty much a freak out, and it shouldn't have been. Obviously Hook ended up kicking out once the referee was back, but something felt off. I felt like the referee was distracted for a little too long, and it just didn't feel. It felt out of place. I was like, they're either going to completely ignore that, or they're going to play off of it in the future. I feel like they're just going to plain ignore it, but it didn't happen. But when I was saying that this didn't go well, you would expect, Joe gets the hot tag, Joe clears house, Joe wins.
There you go.
There was no comeback. Once Joe was in the ring and was the legal man, it was game over. Yeah. I mean, very good way of putting Samoa Joe over, but not what I expected at all. It caught me off guard in a positive way, but it's just not what I would have expected. But yeah, Joe cleaned house, and then the patriarchy then did a post-match beatdown, and that was the end of that segment. Patriarchy ended up on top. Joe got stomped on Cage. Cage has this metal box that has the contracts where he can cash in at any time. It's not the Money in the Bank. It's not Money in the Bank, but he can cash in anytime, any place, and the contract is in the briefcase. But it's not. But it's not
Money in the Bank.
It's not Money in the Bank. It's a completely different concept. Completely different. But he did, with said little case that he holds around, he did stomp Samoa Joe's face into it, which dented it even more. It's got so many dents in from the amount of times that Cage has hit people with it, which is quite funny. Yeah. But it just keeps going on. But yes, he hit him, not with the Money in the Bank briefcase. Then we go to what I referred to earlier, which is a Cope promo where he challenges Moxley for a title match at Revolution. We don't get a response on that yet, but let's be honest, that's going to happen. Then we have what I like to call the squash match section of the show.
Okay, right.
We had the Beast Mortos squash Adam Priest. Then Max Caster came out and interrupted, obviously formerly of the Acclaimed. Mm-hmm. He is now the best professional wrestler in the world.
Not the best in the world.
Not the best in the world.
Just the best
wrestler.
professional wrestler
Yeah,
in the world,
yes,
of course.
exactly.
Okay.
And every week, he said he's going to do an open challenge where someone can step up to the best wrestler in the world and get beaten by the best wrestler in the world.
It's very kind of him.
Very, very kind of him. Very, very kind of him. And then Rush's music hits. And Max Caster gets squashed. So, I didn't expect a squash match to happen to Max Caster so quickly after he's just turned mega heel.
Yeah.
But yeah, Max Caster got squashed and Rush is back in the company. So yeah, we'll see what happens to their little faction with the Beast Mortos obviously in there as well. But it's quite interesting. I don't really know where this is going to go with Max Caster. Is he going to continue doing these open challenges and continue losing every week? I don't really know. I don't know what they'd gain from that either.
Mm-hmm.
That's my only concern is I feel like starting off an open challenge weekly segment with a loss feels a bit weird to me. Next week and the week after, I could be like, this is genius booking. But as of right now, with it being the first week of it, it feels odd to me that they would do that. So yeah, we'll wait and see on that. Then we had the Learning Tree versus the Outrunners. A lot of this was the Outrunners being on top. Outsmarting the Learning Tree, which was Chris Jericho and Brian Keith with Big Bill on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of the Outrunners on top. Obviously, the crowd loved the Outrunners, so they were just feeding into the crowd. But it led to the Learning Tree picking up a sneaky little victory with a little roll-up and getting the win unexpectedly. I think, to be honest, I kind of expected them to get the win, but I didn't expect it to be so one-sided and then them picking up the victory. Then there's a post-match beatdown with the Learning Tree on the Outrunners, and what's going to happen? Powerhouse Hobbs is nowhere to be seen. He's not available. He's not medically cleared. So Bandido returned and ended up making a save for the Outrunners. So they're back to 3v3 while Hobbs is injured. Like, he actually is injured.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to continue the Big Bill Powerhouse Hobbs brawl thing that they've been going on from everything that's been reported. They wanted to continue that on, but Hobbs is actually a little bit hurt. Not hurt to the point where it's going to be a problem, but it
just needs a show off to recover a little bit.
Yeah, he just needs to recover for a few weeks. So Bandido is the perfect person to shove in there. I think what they might do, I feel like the plan was probably to have Bandido come back and help the Outrunners beat the Learning Tree and sort of end that feud.
Yeah.
I think what could happen is they've sort of switched the roles where Bandido fits the role of Powerhouse Hobbs, and Powerhouse Hobbs is the one that returns and causes the victory down the line. I think they might just switch those roles around from what they were intending to do, which is fine. Then we go to a backstage segment where Buddy Matthews basically says to Okada that you're scared, you're running scared, you're saying you'll face anyone, but you won't be. You're not facing me. I've told you I want you. I've got no Julia. I've got no Brody King next to me. Let's do it now. Let's do it. And obviously, Okada's like, no. And then basically, Buddy Matthews calls him a bitch because that is Okada's catchphrase at the moment. And then Okada's like, I'm no bitch. I'm no bitch. And yeah, I don't like the ultra comedy stuff with Okada. I think it sort of dumbs him down a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't mind it when he's doing it.
Yeah.
But when it becomes like someone calls him it and it then becomes like this whole like, how dare you thing, I don't really like that. It makes him too comedy-like.
Yeah.
For me personally, because we know what Okada can do. Let Okada be Okada just a little bit. But again, I feel like that might be because they're holding him back from actually unleashing him.
Yeah.
Then we have Harley Cameron versus Taya Valkyrie. Again, back and forth match with Valkyrie obviously on top for the majority of it because Harley Cameron can't pick up a victory in AEW, can she? She can't win. She's never won in AEW until now.
Until now.
She picks up the victory with a nice little roll up after Valkyrie. Valkyrie basically hit move on her, was like back on top and was like, I've won 1, 2, and then gets rolled up into a crucifix pin. And for the 1, 2, 3, and Harley Cameron picks up the victory. Her first win in AEW. The crowd go absolutely wild. There is a later segment where basically Mercedes sees her and she's like, I've won now. And Mercedes is like, it doesn't happen that easily. And while Harley Cameron has a puppet, Mercedes Moné, it's a real thing. Like, she has a puppet version of Mercedes. Harley Cameron again is comedy gold. Like, they have strict gold with her. I don't know where they found her, but wherever it is brilliant. Like, just phenomenal stuff. Then we have a really good Ricochet promo, a nice little sit down interview with Ricochet, where he basically is just like, I'm obviously going to beat Swerve, people underestimate me, really good like Ricochet promo. Again, proving that Ricochet can do promos. Then Swerve interrupts. And the reason I say he proves that Ricochet can do promos is because Swerve references that straight away. He's like, you tried to be the superhero and these guys didn't believe you. They didn't believe a word coming out of your mouth. And Ricochet was like, yeah, you're right. They say I can't do a promo. They say I can't do this. They say I can't do that. Well, that's because I didn't believe a word I was saying. But I believe who I am now. And then basically Swerve goes, you do realize that this week is going to be a fight between you and me. This is not going to be about flips. This is not going to be about showing off. This is going to be a fight. And Ricochet, you can't win a fight. And then Ricochet obviously goes, basically, I will win and I'll prove it to you.
Yeah.
Nice little ending. Then we have Timeless Tony Storm do a promo. Classic Timeless Tony Storm. It's so nice to see Timeless Tony back.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see her back. She gets like a good couple of minutes here as well, just to sort of soak in the crowd.
Yeah.
And we later learn that Tony does have a match on Dynamite with Mariah May on commentary. So we'll get some progression there. Tony's obviously winning in Australia. It's going to happen. Then we get to a really, really fun match. This was so fun. It was TNT title match between Daniel Garcia, Kyle O'Reilly, and Lee Moriarty. This is just so fast-paced. This is a classic. What I love about a triple threat is you just got two people going at it. Then the next person comes in and takes one of them away. And then the next person comes in and takes them away. And it's like so fast-paced. I cannot explain to you how fast-paced this match was. It was just a lot of like trying to get quick pinfalls as well when they could. And them just like coming in, stopping it. You have this really nice moment where Lee Moriarty is like set up in like by the barricade, like on a chair. And it looks like Garcia and O'Reilly are going to team up to take him out. And Shane Taylor comes in and is like, you're not going to do that. You have to go through me. Next thing you know, Moriarty comes in, takes them both out, and he ends up back on top. We get towards the end of the match, and Shane Taylor gets involved again, causes a distraction. Moriarty then puts a submission hold on Garcia. Garcia looks like he's going to tap. And then Kyle O'Reilly gets involved. He then takes out Shane Taylor. And while he's distracted with Shane Taylor, Garcia manages to reverse things, get into a pin. 1, 2, 3. Garcia retains his title. And naturally, Shane Taylor faction is not very happy. So they attack the people that are in the ring. And they go while they go for the attack, the rest of the Undisputed Kingdom, Daddy Magic and Cool Hand all go for the save. So you have all of the baby faces in the ring and Shane Taylor like productions outside. And then it gets announced that we've got a 3-way trios match for next week's Collision between the Undisputed Kingdom, Daniel Garcia, Daddy Magic and Cool Hand, and then the Shane Taylor productions between each of it. That should be a really good match. I'm really enjoying this almost like 3-way feud while also having two baby faces there. that clearly respect each other, but they want to prove they're better than each other, but can't prove they're better than each other because the heel faction is getting involved at every moment. It's really nicely told, this one. I quite like it, and I also like the fact that this is all revolving around the TNT title. It makes the TNT title feel important. Really nice stuff. Then we have another squash match because Collision hasn't had enough of them on this one. Megan Bayne wins a nice little squash match. Woo! Backstage, we then have Chris Statlander apologize to Willow Nightingale, but Willow's like, no, I don't accept it because of everything you've put me through. Why should I want to be friends with you again after everything you've done to me? Really nice stuff there. I don't know where that's sort of leading, but it's interesting to sort of see. It's nice to see that Willow's not going to just immediately go, oh, we're busy mates again. And then we get to the main event, which is just classic AEW carnage. It's a street fight. The street fight doesn't even make it to the ring initially because it starts in the crowd.
And in what they would call the wrestling version of a street.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The street fight, aka just other parts of the stadium.
Yeah.
And then as the Death Riders are making their entrance, FTR attack them. Ding, ding, ding. We're starting the match in the crowd. And then just to describe a few of the weapons that were involved in this match. Ladder, table, chair, trash can, a like spike, just a straight up spike, and thumbtacks. Oh, and the announce table was broken for the ending of the match. You had Marina Shafir put through the table during the match. She ended up getting involved and putting like one of FTR in I can't remember which one, I didn't write it down, in in a chokehold, and then Shafir ends up being put through the table, and that takes her out the match.
Yep.
Really nice again that Shafir is not involved in the women's division, but is sort of going almost like going at it in the men's division a little bit by being the muscle of the Death Riders. Like even getting involved in the men's matches, which I really like, because when she does end up doing any of the women's stuff, it's going to make her look like a beast going into it. Mox was put through the thumbtacks.
Good.
With the thumbtacks just all in his back. Like completely all over the place. And then FTR put Wheeler Yuta through the table for the 1, 2, 3 on the outside of the ring. It was like a falls count anywhere street fight type thing, rather than a street fight that ends up back in the ring. Makes way more sense to have a street fight being a falls count anywhere. I don't know why any other companies would ever not have that as a rule.
Yeah.
Looking at the WWE, you do it way too many times. But again, Wheeler Yuta was put over as the whipping boy. You know, you've got the world champion, and then you've got the whipping boy of the Death Riders, who eventually then ends up taking the pin. Then there's a brawl after the match, as there always is at the moment. Jay White comes down, takes out John Moxley. Cope comes down, and there's this lovely moment where you've got FTR, Jay White, and Cope in all of the corners while Moxley's in the middle of the ring, like almost looking at like, I've got no help here. Then Moxley's pulled out the ring, and the Death Riders tail it out of there. But FTR picking up the victory over the Death Riders, which is nice. Death Riders losing, which doesn't happen very often. And also, yes, okay, Mox wasn't pinned, but Mox did lose this match, so it'd be interesting to see how they go from there. But very much leading to Cope versus Mox at Revolution.
When is Revolution?
Basically the week after Elimination Chamber, like around that time.
All right, so like early March time, right?
Yeah, so we've got Grand Slam in literally like next week type thing.
Yeah.
We've only got like this week's build and then next week's build, and then we've got Grand Slam.
Yeah.
And then it's about a month after that.
Right.
It's
okay.
Revolution.
No worries. I think I remembered it being in March, but I just couldn't remember specifically when it was. So overall, Collision, good?
Yeah, I liked it. I think it's one of those where the first half of it, ignore, don't watch. Watch the second half.
Right, okay.
Like the first half's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're looking for like the best bits, you probably go to the end. Again, I feel like the match order was probably incorrect on this.
Right.
I think if you had maybe started with the triple threat, that would have been a really good way of starting off the show. Again, I'm personally not a fan of title matches just being sort of shoved in the middle of the show, unless it's like a pay-per-view, because it sort of devalues it, especially when the TNT title is one of the best things at the moment.
Yeah.
And especially with the ending of the Joe Hook match, the fact that it was just so rapid of an ending.
Yeah.
It being the opening match, the only reason it was the opening match was because it's Samoa Joe's match back. That is like the next, like second match back. That's the only reason why. I think again, it's just all it is with AEW. Sometimes it's the match order, especially on Collision. They seem to get it wrong over and over with Collision. I feel like they're not really sure what they want Collision to be, which is fair because they've only just gotten rid of Rampage. So I think they're trying to work out, do we want it to be what Rampage was, or do we want it to be like a B show?
Yeah.
I think they're still trying to work that bit out a little bit, but there are really good stuff on Collision where it feels like a much must-watch show. You've got title matches on there, you've got a street fight on there, you've got progression of stories with the Joe Hook stuff. So there's Harley Cameron winning her first match. So Collision feels important, and that's the big thing for me, is that the B show should feel important, especially with it being 2 hours. But yeah, I just felt like the match order was just wrong, but overall good.
Awesome. Well, good to see AEW having a couple of good shows. And with that being said, let's move on to the Rumble. So, with that being said, the Rumble, of course, over the weekend, and usually is one of the biggest weekends of the year, one of the biggest shows of the year, if not the second biggest, I would say, behind Mania, really. Yeah, I mean, lots to get through, so let's just get straight into it, because, again, we've got lots to talk about. We had the Women's Royal Rumble starting off the show, and yeah, we, of course, had Charlotte Flair coming out as the winner, which I think a lot of people had predicted. I know we had predicted it. Well, I had predicted it, but then changed it at the end to be a bit more interesting.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm putting that asterisk on there just to save my bacon a little bit. But yeah, so Charlotte ended up winning in the end. Again, Bragster, what were your thoughts on the Women's Rumble as a whole?
I think this is a really strong Women's Rumble. I think that over the past few years, especially early on the Women's Rumble, like they were good, but they relied on nostalgia a lot. This one was one that didn't rely on nostalgia one bit. This was very much like, okay, yes, you had Trish and you had Nikki Bella in there, but that was it for nostalgia. Everything else was main roster or NXT talent, and it showcased the main roster NXT talent. You know, they were the stars of the show. You know, you had the first 3 participants in Io Sky, Liv Morgan, and Roxanne Perez stealing the entire Rumble. The Rumble was about them and felt as much so for a very long time. As I'll refer to when we get to the Men's Rumble, the 2 Rumbles were starkly different as well. They've really felt different. You had the Women's Rumble where it was very much like the eliminations were scarce, and it took a very long time before you got the first one, which I think was B-Fab. I could be wrong with that, but I think it was B-Fab that was get eliminated. And it took a long time. We got to like number 10 before we got the first elimination. But I liked that. I liked the fact that they were just posing that, you know, you've got all these different women, all of which are on the same level. Like, how is this going to turn out? So yes, just really good. Like Ivy Nile in there. I felt a bit disappointed, and I'll refer to it again in the Raw review in a minute. But Lyra Valkyria's, ever since she's won the Intercontinental Championship, hasn't felt like a big deal. And she got eliminated with pretty much ease. I think she was the second to be eliminated in this match, and got eliminated by Ivy Nile. And I wanted her to get eliminated by Ivy Nile. I felt like that was a really good progression of things. I felt like either Lyra should have gone far and been eliminated by a returning Becky Lynch, or if you're going to do her elimination earlier on the match, you have Ivy Nile eliminate her. I just felt like it happened too early and happened without... Lyra was one of the only ones that I feel like didn't get a showcase moment where did a load of moves sort of thing. And that was a bit disappointing for me. I don't know what you thought to that, whether it was noticeable to you.
I mean, I've noticed it for a while with Lyra that she's not really had the biggest reactions, even before the tournament started for the belt. it just doesn't seem to have happened yet in terms of a big moment for her, and for her to get that crowd reaction. I think it's coming. I think whenever they set up this Mania match for her, whatever that may be, I think that will probably be a big moment, especially if it is Becky. I think that will probably be a big moment for her. But yeah, in terms of her coming out of the Rumble, there wasn't really much reaction to it at all. And like you said, there was no big moment for her. But again, I think when they've obviously got other people they had in mind, like Roxanne Perez, I think it's difficult to kind of give everyone the shine in a Rumble. But yeah, I think it'll come for Valkyria. But yeah, it's just for some reason it's just not happened yet. But I think it will come. It's just I think it's gonna take a bit more time because again, she's got Bayley. I think it's next week in the Elimination Chamber qualifying match, and I don't personally see her winning that one.
No, I don't, and that's part of my concern is that ever since she's won the title, she's not been on TV, bar a couple of promos, has a really bad showing in the Rumble, and then gets beaten by Bayley next week. She looks weak as a champion. And, especially if the Mania match is Becky, which after Becky not returning in the Rumble, I think actually makes it more likely that it is Becky. I think that it just shows, I feel like going into that match, I'm not going to believe that Lyra is going to win.
Yeah.
And I also think that they won't book her to win.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance of that. Yeah, I agree, but I also think there is time between now and say after next week when she faces Bayley for her to get built back up again. Because again, you can have her have matches on Raw and win title matches. Like it doesn't have to be like a Cena. I face someone every week. Just every couple of weeks has another match with someone, and like it doesn't. Like, it's not obviously going to take a lot to do that, to build that back up again. Again, they could totally surprise us, and she does beat Bayley. I'd be surprised if she did, but if she did beat Bayley, that's one way to get that started and sort of light her back up again. But I do think that, obviously, it's going to take a few matches of her being on Raw defending the belt between now and Mania to get that sort of momentum built back up again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see, obviously, where that takes her.
Yeah, exactly. And then, as you sort of said with the shines in the Rumble, I think there is really nice shine from Jordynne Grace. I thought that, she got a really nice showing. Probably not as strong as, both of us predicted her to have a much stronger showing. It wasn't as strong as I initially thought it would be. But she still had a very good showing. We all know the Piper Niven moment that was just unbelievable. Lash Legend, also another one that had a really good showing. And immediately, within 1 or 2 minutes of being in the match, I was like, okay, you're going to be big. You're going to be a big deal. And you sort of felt that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention Lash before I forgot about her, but going back to Jordynne Grace, what I found quite interesting is, if I remember correctly, she got eliminated by Julia, which immediately made me go, are they sending Grace to NXT? Is that what they're doing? Are they having Julia versus Jordynne Grace be the stand and deliver match and have Jordynne Grace win the NXT title really quickly? Because why else would you have Julia be the one that eliminates her if that's your plan? I don't know.
Yeah, again, that very well could be the case. I know when we did the predictions last week and we talked about Jordynne Grace, you did say you felt like she was going to NXT, and I maybe dangled the carrot a little bit and said maybe it could be the US title she goes for, and that be a package she could go with. But yeah, that kind of pointed to that, I think. Obviously, we'll wait and see as to what comes next. I just felt like the way she was perceived last year, and then how she's been perceived really for the past few years, really, and obviously WWE have been big fans of her and have brought her in as soon as that contract's been up. She's in straight away. It felt like to me she was gonna be going to the main roster,
That's
but
what I presumed.
I'm not necessarily against the going to NXT because again,
No.
even if it doesn't have to be a 2-3 year thing in NXT, it can be she wins the title and loses it by SummerSlam and then she's up straight away,
Yeah.
and she's just bedding herself in sort of thing. So yeah, but again, happy with what I saw from Jordan Grace and from all of the NXT guys really.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was my highlight of this Rumble, was how well it showcased all of the younger talent and the up and comers, if you want to call them that,
Yeah.
and giving Roxanne Perez the spotlight. And again, feel like Roxanne's gonna be a big member of the main roster going forward. Really, I feel like she's gonna be a big part of that conversation, and Julia as well as Lash, like you mentioned. I think that was my main highlight of the Women's Rumble. I think my main downgrade of it all, and again, I've got a few notes on this particular character in Raw, is Charlotte Flair. It just felt flat for me, and I know she's been out for a while, and again, I know how good she is and how respected she is in the wrestling community, but for me, it didn't feel right, it being Charlotte. Again, I've been asked who would it be in your place, and I'm kind of like, I don't really have an answer. But I if personally, from watching it, I would have gone with Roxanne and just given her the Iron Lady / give her the Rumble, and then have that be a big moment. Again, doesn't have to be a win for at Mania, but again, that's a made moment for her already, and maybe go in that direction. I just feel like Charlotte was the easy answer. It just felt like it was Cody coming back from injury 2 years ago, and Charlotte came back from injury and won it again. And then the follow-up on Raw hasn't really given me any sort of hype for Charlotte coming back, which we'll get into in a bit. Yeah. So I did enjoy the Women's Rumble. It wasn't like I watched it and thought, oh, this wasn't a great Rumble overall. I thought if I was to mark it, I'd probably give it an 8. And then
I was thinking about the same. Yeah.
Because again, there wasn't, apart from obviously Alexa, I don't really think there was those big surprises that you would like in a Rumble.
Pop of the night.
Oh yeah, like Alexa coming back was
you couldn't
pop.
hear the commentary. You couldn't hear anything. It was incredible pop for Alexa, and she has not lost a beat.
Yeah,
Jesus. Yeah. Usually there's a bit of ring rust, but there was none. But that was a highlight.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how long it had actually been. Like, I didn't realize it had been over 2 years since we'd last seen her. So, again, it's great to see her back. And again, one of the things I'm more excited about to see going forward. And again, just saying that there, like, if Alexa had won, would anyone have complained with that? No. I don't think so. Like, I don't think anyone would have been like, oh, Alexa's versus Rhea or Alexa versus Tiffy. Like that
Alexa Rhea really does pique my interest.
even if the match wasn't that great, the build up to that would have been phenomenal, as we get a announcement from Google there, or Alexa, one of the two.
it was
Alexa. So yeah, I just think that for me would have been great. But again, that's just off the top of my head, just after talking about it there. But yeah, I think the Women's Rumble match was good. And again, hopefully the build up to the women's matches at Mania will pay off better than what the initial round of promos has done. Yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think I think that, as you said, there was the downgrade. Now, this is someone who wanted Charlotte Flair to win, believed that Charlotte Flair should have won, still believes that to probably be the case, and also won money off of Charlotte Flair winning. But for me, and you kind of summed it up perfectly, it sort of fell flat. And it was weird because it was the right choice, but after that Rumble, it didn't feel like the right choice. Weirdly. And it's really hard to explain, because I still believe it is the right choice. And I still believe that her and Tiffy is the right match to go down. And I think it's way more compelling having people fight over Rhea's title, and who's going to go after Rhea, because Rhea has so much history with so many people. It could literally be anyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably going to be Io, but it could literally be anyone, and you would be a happy bunny. It's I feel like it was the right choice, but it felt weird at the end of the match, and I don't know whether that's. I probably wouldn't have had Roxanne be the last person eliminated, just because I think at that point it was like, okay, Roxanne, this would be great for Roxanne. As we find out later, it's actually the final two of both Rumbles is kind of interesting, because it's like they had the winners differently. So they had the experienced person and the one you're going, oh my God, imagine if they win. And in one situation, the obvious wins, and in the other situation, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a weird one, but I think also what was weird and probably the incorrect choice was having Nikki Bella be number 30. Because, okay, yes, surprise, but when Charlotte came out at number 27, immediately my brain went, oh, someone big's coming back. And immediately my brain went Jade Cargill, went Becky Lynch, and AJ Lee. Were the three that immediately came to mind. That I was sitting there going, with Charlotte out now, okay, then surely it's got to be one of those three. It's got to be a big return.
Yeah.
And instead it was Nikki Bella, which I know is a return, but no one in 2025 cares about Nikki Bella. No offense. No one does. And what was even funnier was when they cut to this dome thing.
Oh, yeah.
And Michael Cole's like, and they go berserk for Nikki Bella's return.
And then there's two at the front just like...
And you just see them go, and sort of nod. And you're just like, they do not go berserk at all. And I felt bad for Michael Cole, because obviously he's been told what to say.
He's trying to hype up the reaction, yeah.
Yeah, and it just was, but it summed up the reaction of everybody, which was, I mean, they set it up to be a big return, and then it was Nikki Bella. I think if Nikki Bella was 29, I think she would have got a really good reaction.
Yeah.
But the fact that she was 30, for me, your two choices were you have a big return at 30 or Charlotte Flair's 30, and Charlotte Flair wins, lol, is what the entire match is.
Yeah.
Which is, I felt like those were two choices, and that's not what they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree that something, and so as you said, the Raw promo made something feel even more off.
Yeah.
And it was weird. But it's quite obvious they want you to boo Charlotte. This is a very clever way of getting Tiffany cheered, and turning Tiffany face. And all of these reactions similar to what Charlotte Flair sort of says in her promo on Raw. It's exactly what they want.
My concern, and again we'll get into it in future podcasts, is what the outcome of that match is. But I'm hoping that it doesn't go the way I think it's going to go. But enough of that, because again, plenty of time on the Women's Rumble there. Let's get into the next one, which was Motor City Machine Guns against DIY in a 2 out of 3 falls match, with DIY picking up the win. Bragster being right, which he's obviously happy about. I told
you so.
Well, I know, but the problem is with predictions, I don't do what I actually think is going to happen. I always end up predicting what I want to happen, and it's something I always fall on, and it comes back to bite me. So in terms of the tag match, any real thoughts on that one?
I thought it was solid. I thought that they unfortunately get the classic post-Rumble spot.
Yeah.
And someone has to do it, and it wasn't going to be Cody and Kevin Owens, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So they naturally, because it's post-Rumble, they have to start slow. I actually felt that it was a really good match that was actually let down by the crowd, and it's not the crowd's fault.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a classic post-Rumble match where the crowd are out of breath, everyone's going to the toilet or getting their drinks, and the crowd reaction for the first 2 falls wasn't that, after the second fall it picked up, But until then, the crowd didn't sound that into it. And whether that's just because 2 out of 3 falls matches maybe have become too predictable recently, I don't know. But yeah, it felt a bit slow to begin with. And then it picked up for that final fall. It really felt like things were hotting up, and there were some really good near falls where both hit their finishers and then both ended up kicking out. Really fun match. Really interesting ending with the Street Profits interfering and sort of giving DIY the win.
Yeah.
But then attacking DIY after the match. Michael Cole, you legend, because he explained it so quickly as to why Street Profits did it, rather than waiting and having everyone do what Wade Barrett was doing and be like, why did they do that? That's just silly. Michael Cole explained it so quickly and so efficiently of they did this because they want to take the titles off of the people that attacked them, which was DIY.
Yeah.
Like this had nothing to do with the Motor City Machine Guns. They just wanted DIY to hold the titles so then they could beat them for the titles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there you go. There's your explanation. Really well told. I'm intrigued to see where it goes. It wasn't an amazing match, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm sat here bored. I was enjoying the match. It's just a classic mid pay-per-view lull match or post Rumble lull match.
I agree. I think I always have a problem with the 2 out of 3 falls stipulation, because I think unless you've got time to sort of really build the falls, I don't think it works as well, especially when it's if you've got less than like 20 minutes to work with, you're kind of rushing everything to get to that point. But again, I think the Street Profits coming out certainly makes the next part of that tag title scene a lot more interesting. We'll be interested to see what happens with Motor City, because again, where does that leave them? Do they sort of sit and wait in the background till Street Profits pick up the titles and then that's who they go up against? But yeah, looking forward to see what happens next with it. Felt the match was decent. I didn't think it was brilliant by any stretch of the imagination, but again, it's like you say, it was in that post-Rumble spot where no one really wants to be, but they made the best out of it, and we'll see what happens next with it, I guess. But yeah, so from the tag match, we then led into probably the longest building match, I would say, that we've had for a title match for a while, which was KO versus Cody in the ladder match. And again, instant thoughts on this one was just absolutely brutal. Some of the shots that were taken in that match, oh, good Lord. My back is still recovering from watching that match twice, because I watched it live and I watched it yesterday, and my Lord, it was not a pretty sight watching some of those bumps.
No, it was a phenomenal match. This is a ladder match. This is what a ladder match should be. Everything about this felt just brilliant. It felt perfect. It felt exactly what, like, the entire build was, we are going to kill each other. I hate you, you hate me, I'm going to kill you. And they did it. And like, it's so refreshing to see a build be, I'm going to murder you, and then they literally try and murder each other. You know, and Cody's promo with Punk sort of being referenced throughout this, that, you know, it sort of turns you dark. You know, when you hold on to that title for so long, you want it that badly that you don't care what happens. Yeah. And that's sort of coming to fruition when he doesn't even check on Owens after the match, you know, is very un-Cody-like, and just shows the progression that's going with Cody's character, which I really, really like. Yeah. One of the best spots being the package backdrop onto the ladder that just Cody took like an absolute champ, that just looked so incredibly brutal. And again, WWE putting over so well the impact of that by pausing the match, by literally having all of the officials come out, Sammy come out, and then immediately you're thinking, what's going to happen with Sammy? Spoiler alert, nothing happens with Sammy. Yeah. And again, that's another element that I really enjoyed, was it made you think, like by having that because I was like, how in the world is Sammy going to come out? Because he's not going to come out for the save for anyone, because why would he do that? Because he likes them both. But then that moment of they're both so incredibly hurt that he comes down to check on his friends. But by doing that, in the back of your mind for the rest of the match, you're thinking, what is Sammy going to do?
Yeah.
Like, and he does nothing. He literally sticks to his word. You are both my friends. I'm just going to let you fight it out. But yeah, just that moment and just having that break in the match where the crowd can eat it up, and then Owens going straight back on the attack, going for the package pile driver, and then Cody hitting the Alabama slam through the ladder, which again looked brutal, and Owens took it like an absolute champ and ended up almost upside down. Owens at one point bleeding like an absolute madman, which you don't often see in WWE, but it's so refreshing to see. And then you have Cody obviously go up to win the title, and this is where the whole Sammy thing plays perfectly. Is Owens is down and out, no chance of Owens winning this match, and yet as Cody was rising up that ladder to take the titles, there's an element of every single one of us that went, is Sammy going to tip it over?
Yeah.
Just that moment, and that usually in ladder matches, one of the flaws is that something big happens, and then they're climbing up the ladder and they're climbing it slowly, and you know they're going to pick up the titles and win. But there was, by adding that Sammy element, added that doubt all the way until he actually took him off, which is very rare in a ladder match and almost negated one of the natural flaws of a ladder match.
Yeah.
I thought this was a phenomenal match that lived up to the build for out the entire thing. It's led to really interesting stuff with Sammy, really interesting stuff with Owens, and Cody has an interesting story heading into Mania. Every single person coming out of this match came out better than they did before. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you say, going into it, my biggest concern was that the match, not that I didn't think it would, but I was worried that the match might not live up to the build, because there has been such a long build to get to this point, and it's kind of like you need, if you get that payoff, it's like the Punk Drew Hell in a Cell match. You were going into thinking this is probably going to be an absolute banger of a match, but there's always that chance that it stinks up the joint, and then you've had 6 months of build up to that moment, and it doesn't quite hit. But that match for me just was great. I mean, from the initial brawl out in the arena, Kevin Owens ripping a fan's beer out the hands and pouring it over Cody, and then smashing Cody into the camera, and then the back and forth with the different uses of the ladders, the mini ladder being used, and so Kevin Owens being like, what the hell's this? Standing on top of it, about to do a splash, goes, no, sod that, climbs back down it, and then hits him with it anyway. Like, it was both guys at their best, KO at his best, and again, just brutal shot after shot after shot, just making me cringe even now just thinking about some of them. It was just a brilliant match, and like you say, what every character in that build has now is something to go from, and it's going to be even more intriguing to see what happens next. And like, there could even be, I was even thinking about it the other, like after the match, I was thinking there could be a moment here where everyone goes, Kevin was right, and like KO was like, look, I told you this was the guy that I was dealing with, and this is what he's turning into. And then then the Sammy part of the equation, now the KO part of the equation, of course, with what happened at Raw. It's just, it's done what all good feuds do, which is have a brilliant ending, but then makes you wonder what's next. It makes you look forward to what's coming next. And it's done exactly that. So again, props to both guys in that match, because good Lord, was that a war.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, let's go into the final match of the Rumble, and that was the men's Royal Rumble. And
Yeet
indeed.
Yeet.
Jey Uso, of all people, coming out winning. Again, I think I looked at the odds beforehand to see who was favourite and like who was in and around there, and I think Jey was like seventh or 8th on the list. Like, he was not
about 20-1.
Yeah, he was about 20-1. So if you looked at Jey and thought, that's my guy, and you put a little bit of money on it, you were making something out of it.
Oh yeah.
Because again, it was funny because I was watching it yesterday with my lovely wife, and I think we're around 23, 24 in, and I said, "So who do you think's winning then?" And she was just like, "I think it'll be Punk. It's probably going to be Punk, or maybe Cena, because with it being his last one."
Mm-hmm.
And then we got down to like the final 6, and I was like, "Okay, so." Oh no, she also mentioned she'd like it to be AJ because she's a big fan of AJ.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, a surprise return.
Great return.
Again, original music as well. That's what I wanted. That they've given us it. And then we got down to the final 6, and then she was like, "Oh well, AJ's not there, so it's not going to be him." And she's looking at them, and she goes, "It'd be a bit weird if it was Jay, wouldn't it? It'd be a bit random, wouldn't it, if it was Jay?" And I was just like, interesting thought process. Watched it. And then got down to Cena and Jay. She's like, "Oh, Cena's going to win. Cena's going to win." And then, of course, what happened. She's like, "Oh, I really like that." And then we obviously watched the end of it and eating with everyone. But yeah, that was it. The surprise, and that's what I've always wanted from a Rumble is somebody not expected to win it.
Yes.
That's what the Rumble... It's not... Obviously, every year isn't going to be that with a Rumble.
No.
But every now and then, just adding a surprise element to a winner to make you think, oh, maybe they could do something different this year. And that's what they did. And I thought that was great.
No, I agree. I think I've seen a lot of people's takes on this. I've listened to a lot of videos by different content creators and stuff like that. And... I actually think Simon Miller put it best. It was probably the best person that I've seen sort of pull it, and he sort of said that, you know, we've been asking for this for a while and we've got it. You know, someone different winning. He said, but what it also shows is this era is different. That you can get behind somebody, and if you get behind them for long enough,
yep,
they will change their minds. They will change plans. They will go against the grain. They will give that person their moment. And that's exactly what Jay's getting.
Yeah.
Jay's getting the moment that we all know he deserves.
Yeah.
You know, and you can say what you like, and you know, people will refer to the YouTube dislikes and will refer to the backlash on Twitter. Listen to that crowd and tell me that's the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Then watch Raw and listen to that crowd and tell me that's the wrong decision.
Yeah.
We have said this from day one of the podcast. I've said it literally on the Netflix debut. If you watch that Netflix debut, you will, as a fresh casual fan, you will go, Jey Uso is the biggest star in the company.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Guess what? He is now the biggest star in the company.
Mm-hmm.
We all got behind him. We all saw the last 5 years, the development of this story ever since the pandemic era, ever since the Hell in a Cell I Quit match with Roman Reigns. We've stuck by Jay. We've watched the rise of Jay. I was there in the arena for the day that he pinned Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
And we have stuck by him, and he's finally going to get his moment. And I don't give a rat's ass that he is so obvious he's winning the title, because he rightfully deserves it.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's obvious. I don't care, because it may, to a lot of people, may not be the right decision, right? There's going to be a lot of people who believe that Cena was the right decision, that believe that Punk was the right decision, but you cannot go against the fact that Jay, number one, deserves it, and number two, my God, was it a joyous shock. Like, you just got to the end and you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that is the biggest shock since Shinsuke.
Yeah.
And probably before that, the biggest shock since Ray won it.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, this does not happen very often. You know, every 10 years, you possibly get a shocking winner. And we got it this year in the most star-studded Rumble, and easily one of, if not my favorite Royal Rumble from start to finish. It was so well done that from the moment this Rumble started with Penta and Ray to, you know, the few quick eliminations, the story of Chad Gable during the early stages, that he just kept getting luchadors, or the people that he's wronged, for the start of this match, was just, again, brilliant. You have Braun come in and be an absolute beast immediately, and immediately stomp himself into the match.
Yep.
Then you have the funny moment where Akira Tozawa gets taken out and Speed ends up going in. And at that time, I was like, oh, here we go, Speed. They did use his awful World Cup song, which is hilarious as his entrance music. And then he goes in the ring. He helps eliminate Otis with the help of Braun, does the Sue, does a backflip, and then gets absolutely mauled by Bron Breakker. It was what I like to call, in fairness, a perfect celebrity appearance, which is they go in the Rumble, they do something memorable that's going to get clicks online, and my God, did it get some clicks online.
Yeah, it did, yep. It did.
And then it's a moment that everyone talks about, and it's a funny, comedic moment, and then you move on with the rest of the Rumble. And that's exactly what it did. You then move into the fact that halfway through this Rumble, bear in mind that none of the big stars really had come in yet, maybe apart from maybe Drew was in at this point, but I don't really know. But I got about halfway through, and I had to watch it the next day because I was working that night. And I messaged my friend being like, this is one of the best Rumbles I've ever seen, like already. And he messaged back, you wait. And then the next entrant at number 16 was Roman Reigns. And I went, oh boy. And then, this is not even included in the fact that Joe Hendry appeared. Right? Yeah. He had a shining moment, which was brilliant to see. Roman Reigns has these interactions, has one of the interactions with Joe Hendry. You then get to the unbelievable showdown between CM Punk, John Cena, Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins. Nothing happened for nearly 6 minutes of this match. Not one person hit a move, and it was one of the best things I've ever seen. It was like you just had a stare off between everyone, and it was so perfectly done where you have the stare off between Roman and Cena, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Bang, Punk comes in, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Just a stare down for 2 minutes. Next thing happens, and Seth's in there, and you're like, this is amazing. What's going on? And it just built and built and built and built. Logan being number 30 was just hilarious. I think that, fair enough. Like, it was a really clever way of it not being a surprise and getting that reaction of, oh, it's him. But it's like, that's the reaction they want you to have with Logan, so it works. And you have the Jacob Fatu moments. You have Roman eliminating everyone. You have Penta being the Iron Man of the entire thing and getting a push, despite the fact that he didn't really make it that far in the Rumble.
No, he didn't.
I thought he was going to make it far later on, but it was almost like they were like, we're going to give you this moment, but you are not involved in this latter part. And that it really felt like Penta's elimination was almost like the company going, now you've got to focus on the stars. Penta's out. We've given him his shine. Now you focus on who's actually going to win the match. And then we had the entire build, the entire ending. You had Roman, Seth, and Punk, that really interesting interaction where Punk eliminates both of them. Logan Paul eliminates Punk. At that point, you're like, what? And then you have Seth go absolutely ballistic and take out Roman Reigns, and you have Roman's like plea to Punk as, why did you do that? We were literally teamed a month ago. And you have Punk getting irate at Paul Heyman, which he doesn't usually do. And it just all building so nicely to whatever the hell is going to happen between those three at Mania. And then you get that entire ending that once Logan Paul was out the ring, you were watching it as a fan going, I don't mind. And it's very rare in the Rumble you get that, where you just don't really mind who comes out the victor. And it ended up being one of the biggest shocks ever. I thought this was a phenomenal Royal Rumble from start to finish. It did not lull at any point. It didn't let you breathe. And it built so brilliantly that you were just reaching the end and you really just did not know. They left that entire unpredictability all the way until you knew who had won it.
Okay. Yeah, again, I don't disagree with any of the highlights that you point out there. I would maybe stop a little bit short of saying it's the best one yet, because again, I'm one of those guys that I initially watch a Rumble and I think, oh, this is really good, or this is really bad. And then 6 months later, I'll watch it again and I'm like, oh, okay, this is how I actually feel about it. Like, I need a few more views to get there. Because again, 2010, I think, is my shining on the top of the Rumble podium, if you want to call it. But I think this is definitely up there. I'll have to, again, I think I have to see how I feel in a few months once I've watched it again. Probably watch it again before Mania, and I'll probably have a better idea. But I do think, in terms of the pacing of it, like you say, I think it was really good. I don't think there was any sort of lulls. And again, having that stare off in the middle between Roman to Cena to then Punk to then Seth, I thought was a very clever way of just sort of letting it breathe for a second and then go again and into sort of the second half of the match. And again, I think obviously there was a bit of controversy over how Drew went out because of things going on there, and we'll see obviously what the ramifications are of that in the coming weeks. But because you could see Drew was shocked. You could see Damien was kind of a bit like, oh, but then when it went to him, he was like, haha, I've got you out, sort of thing, which he obviously played off quite nicely. But again, again, the thing that excited me most, but again, it's because I'm a fan of all three of those guys, was the Punk, Seth, and Roman bit when you had Seth finally snapping and just basically going, sod this, whoever gets in my way is on a warpath right now, and they're getting it. Double stomp to Roman's head, which I don't think many people really spoke about. They said it was a stomp, but he used basically like a two-footed challenge in football. It's for the jugular. And then obviously he's just looking at Punk. They have a bit of a scrap, and then Punk basically is looking at him and going, "Oh, we're having a conversation later, buddy." And then Heyman's like, "What have you done? He's on the floor. Why have you done this?" And like, to Seth, and then Seth's like middle finger, and then goes and does it again to Roman on the steel steps, and just like it was one of those Rumbles that I knew as I was watching it, I was enjoying it more and more and more. And that's how, to me, a Rumble should always build. You shouldn't have your early starters be the main attraction to it. And they've built it properly, this Rumble. You had 6 people going in who realistically could win it. And it turned out to be none of those 6, which was great. And it wasn't a surprise return either. It wasn't some randomer at 30 coming back. Like, it wasn't The Rock coming in at 30 as a surprise going, ha, you've been in here for half an hour, I'm just going to throw you all out now because you're knackered. Like, it was someone who was already in there and someone who has been building up to something like this and getting this opportunity. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, why did it have to be Jey? Should it really have been him? And I understand the arguments if we were talking about 3 or 4 months ago. But the past few months has shown me that he is one of those guys now, that he can be one of those guys. And we're not going to know fully if he can be a top tier guy until he has that big moment and has the title. And we have to see what happens. And like you're saying about the predictability, we had Kofi as predictable. No one complained at Kofi being predictable. We had Cody the second year being predictable. No one complained at that. So I don't see why people are complaining with Jey now.
No. And I sort of agree with you with the whole, like, we'll see what he's like as champion. Because one big point, how many people said Damian Priest doesn't have what it takes to be a top champion? And then he won it, and he goddamn was. And he was a brilliant champion and held that championship so well, and felt like a big deal. And I would argue Jey Uso feels like a much bigger deal than Damian Priest ever did before winning that championship. So, you know, as you said, you won't know until you do it. And why not do it when the guy is the hottest thing right now? And it's not just because of catchphrase. He's been hot for a very long time.
It's been building to this point. And again, I do have the one thing I would say is why have him in that title match against Gunther. But I don't know if that was maybe we want to see how you do in this place against him. and if it goes as well as we think it will,
Yeah.
then that we're gonna make the choice, and we're gonna push you into Mania.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's purely speculation on my part, but again, I'm not unhappy that Jey won it. Again, much happier with Jey winning it than I was Charlotte winning it, because again, it was my reaction was that of Cena's when Cena flew and hit that ground, and he's just like, oh no. I was like, oh god, like what? Like, it's Cena. Like, this doesn't really happen. Like, even though he hasn't won in over 2,000 days, like, we still expected Cena to win, such as his legacy. And Jey winning it will be whether it goes well from now on.
Mm-hmm.
That moment will be a moment that everybody will remember who watched that Rumble.
Yeah.
In 5 years and 10 years, everyone's going to remember this Rumble for that reason.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you want from it. And it's given a guy who should get a push the next part of it. And hopefully between now and Mania, because again, we're saying this for Mania, there's now about 10 weeks, I think, now to Mania. So there's a long build to go, and there's a lot to get through to get to that point. And again, I think that's why we don't necessarily know everything now like we normally would. Like, normally you come out of a Rumble and you go, well, this is what's going to happen here, this is what's going to happen here. But I think because you have such a long build, and you've still got Elimination Chamber still a month away, we don't know a lot. And I think normally I would come out of a Rumble thinking, oh, I'm not sure here.
Yeah.
But after this, I'm more than happy to go on the journey of what we're going to see now between now and Mania. Again, the early in terms of the early starts, the Braun was sort of the one that, again, he's impressed me every time I see him. But again, his little part in it was great, and I think again he's going to be someone after Mania, if he doesn't have the Intercontinental title, I think he's someone we're going to see a lot of, which we rightfully should. Maybe that's Jay's first challenger. That could be a route to go. Love Braun, love Chad as always. Penta, again, we say a lot of good things about Penta, and I've got some good things to say about Penta coming up for Raw as always. And yeah, and even to be honest, even the speed bit didn't really bug me out like it usually does. He was in and out, and I was like, right, okay, we've got that bit done. We can move on now. But it wasn't the worst. The smack of that spear was just fantastic. And then all the stuff with Seth, Roman, and Punk, like I mentioned before, I just thought it was a great Rumble, top to bottom, and just only intrigued to see what happens from here.
Yep, literally.
So, with that being said,
we should, before we go to Raw.
I wasn't going to Raw.
Oh, were you not?
No. You just have some confidence in your co-commentator, sir. Have some confidence.
I'll pour myself a new drink.
You pour yourself a drink. Right. Before I get rudely interrupted by my co-commentator, what? Okay, so this is the main point of discussion, I guess, for the podcast, and we kind of touched on it a little bit before. Do you think this was the best Royal Rumble ever, Bragster?
Pay-per-view. I think this is the best Royal Rumble pay-per-view I've seen in my lifetime. From top to bottom, this is the most I have enjoyed an entire Royal Rumble show. Now, that might be recency bias, and I understand that. And in 6 months' time, I could completely go against it. And feel free to clip me now and throw it straight back in my face. But I think coming out of it, the entire time I was messaging my friends, just being like, this is brilliant. This is amazing. This is brilliant. And it was just non-stop. At no point did I think, and that was my reaction. At no point. The entire time I was like, this is awesome. This is great. Really enjoying this. This is brilliant. 2 great Rumble matches that both felt so different to one another. You have a really nice tag team showcase, and you have one of the most brutal ladder matches I have seen in recent time.
Yep.
You put all that together, and it is a solid show from start to finish with 0 lulls, complaints, whatever. None. And I think back to previous pay-per-views, and we sort of alluded to it last week, but when was the last time that you could come out of a show and go, oh, we've had two really good Royal Rumble matches? Probably the last time is when Asuka and Shinsuke won it on the same night. Is possibly the last time you could say that both Rumbles have lived up to expectations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, the Asuka one's always a funny one for me because it was Asuka winning it. It was this great moment of it being the first women's Royal Rumble, and then they brought out Ronda.
Yeah,
and that always muddies that one for me, and it shouldn't, but it does.
No, it does, and therefore you then got to think before that, and like you think before that, and what year are we at now? Probably like 2016, 2015.
Yeah.
And you're looking at, okay, you're looking at what, 2016, which was Roman's Rumble, loads of complaints. The year before that, Roman winning it, loads of complaints. The year before that, Batista winning it, loads of complaints. 2013, I'm now forgetting 2013. But before that, you've got the likes of Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio's winning it, John Cena's winning it.
Yeah.
That people did not want.
Yeah.
Probably the last great winner was probably, as we've mentioned before, 2010 with Edge.
Yeah.
And we're going back 15 years before we get to a pay-per-view where it satisfyingly concludes.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, and I'm not going to lie to you, I don't remember the other matches on that card necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be again, because of the way it's built and the fact that it was only 4 matches rather than putting loads of matches in. But this is going to be a Rumble pay-per-view. I don't just remember because of the Rumbles. I remember because of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I will remember from start to finish this Rumble. And there's not many pay-per-views, Royal Rumble pay-per-views, I can say have done that.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, what matches or what cards could I remember? And there's only a few that I could really remember, but that didn't necessarily mean I remembered them for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, I was thinking of the 2017 Rumble, because that was when you had the AJ Cena match for the title, which again is one of my favorites of a other match other than the Rumble. It's probably one of my favorite matches out there. But then you had the Randy Orton win of that Rumble, because that was when he was going on to face Bray at Mania. Not that we knew that at the time, but that's what that was building to. But then even then, there wasn't the Women's Rumble there. They had some like other weird matches, which was like Kevin Owens and Roman. I think Jericho was maybe in a shark cage at that point.
Yeah.
Because that was before KO and Jericho had broken up.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think, despite some quarrels with it, mainly on the women's side in terms of the winner, and obviously how that's kind of fallen a bit flat, I would say top to bottom, yeah, it probably is. Because again, each match had its own merits, and it wasn't one of those pay-per-views where it dragged. Like 3 or 4 hours for a pay-per-view not to drag is a pretty good going. There wasn't really a filler match. Like the tag match, of course, had that awful spot of being after the Women's Royal Rumble, but even as a match, I still felt it was pretty good. It wasn't like it didn't feel out of place on the card. It felt like it should have been there, on a quality standpoint, especially. So, yeah, I probably have to agree. It probably is. It probably is up there as one of the best Rumbles, if not the best Rumble that we've had, which is surprising because, again, I live unfortunately on the cynic side sometimes when it comes to my thoughts on pro wrestling, but I did think with all the hype into that men's Rumble, there was no way they could pay it off, and they somehow managed to in my head. So, and again, there'll be people out there that'll disagree, and everyone will say, well, it's not the best men's Rumble match, and it maybe isn't, but in terms of the overall card, top to bottom, I don't think there's many Rumbles out there that can even match that, much less get near it. So, yeah, interesting. Very interesting. We'll see, obviously, how the build goes for the Rumble. And yeah, we'll take it from here, basically. So, going on from the Rumble, then we'll go into a quick recap of Raw because again, what do you want?
I feel like now is the time to go through the predictions first.
Oh, do we have to?
Yeah, we have to, Grimmy, because there's gonna be viewers who are gonna be like, "Oh, what happened? What happened?"
No, there isn't though, is there? There isn't really. There isn't. There isn't.
There is.
There isn't though.
There is.
Oh, okay,
it was extremely close.
Well, at least there was that. At least I've got that to go for me.
I cannot explain to you how I cleared house for the Women's Rumble and then you cleared house for the Men's Rumble. So, obviously, the obvious one is the 2 out of 3 falls match we've already gone through.
Yeah.
I had DIY to win it through shenanigans as well, and they won it through shenanigans.
It's almost like you're training and wrestling or something. I don't know. Like
that helps.
Yeah, I know, right?
Then we both had Cody to win, so that makes sense. Then there's the Women's Rumble. Someone on this podcast changed their mind.
Well,
and someone on this podcast may regret changing their mind.
Yeah.
Because Charlotte Flair won. Points for Bragster.
Uh-huh.
Then, most eliminations. Congratulations, Grimmy.
Thank you.
Miss Nia Jax did that in pretty much one move.
Yeah.
In the most convoluted spot I have ever seen in a Royal Rumble. That I don't think hit really for me, but congratulations, you got most eliminations.
Yeah.
Then we go to the surprises.
Mm.
Congratulations for getting Trish Stratus, Grimmy.
Thank you.
Gold star smiley face. And then what had the really obvious one in Jordan Grace. And then Alexa Bliss returned. Oh. So
I just really wanted that AJ Lee return, Bragster. I can't.
No, trust me, that in the men's rumble, there's one of mine that I'm like, I really, really wanted that. It just didn't come. At one point, Io Sky was really close to being the Iron Woman of the entire match, to the point where I was sitting here giggling watching it because like Charlotte Flair, like I was like, okay, Charlotte's gonna win. Jordan Grace had appeared and gotten a couple of eliminations early. Alexa Bliss had appeared. Io Sky was on course to become the Iron Woman.
Yeah.
Then obviously, like Nia Jax hadn't been in yet, so I was like, "There's a real good chance that Jordan Grace ends up with most eliminations here." And there was enough time where Masha Slamovich could have turned up, and easily could have done, because they were putting over former Impact TNA World Champion, former TNA World Champion here, former TNA World Champion here. So I was like, I was literally just sat there laughing, like I could actually clean sweep this. In the end, Io didn't win the Iron Woman, so you kind of got saved a little bit there. Then we get to the men's match.
Yeah.
CM Punk, neither of us got. Penta was the Iron Man. Congratulations.
What can I say? What can I say?
I'm going to skip the next one and go straight to the surprises.
Why are you skipping the next one?
There's a reason why.
Oh, right, okay.
So the surprises.
Wait, so hang on. Who did you say for Iron Man?
Iron Man, I said Sami Zayn.
Oh, right, okay.
Because you stole Penta off of me. So I went with Sami.
Okay.
I've never been so wrong. Because he did not get a good showing in that Rumble. No, surprises, I got Speed. Really early on as well, which I was really happy with. And then you got Joe Hendry and AJ Styles.
Yeah.
At that point, we are drawing.
Yeah.
And then I had to go to Wikipedia.
Oh, God. You had to use Wikipedia.
I did.
Oh.
Because they never once declared, unlike the Women's Rumble, who got most eliminations.
Oh.
Exactly. I had to consult Wikipedia. Because, unfortunately for you, Grimmy, Drew McIntyre did not get most eliminations. I think he got like 1.
Yeah.
But then Roman Reigns got 4.
Yeah, he did. But also,
But so did Jacob Fatu, who also got 4 eliminations.
Right.
despite getting eliminated a lot earlier than I thought he would.
Mm.
So therefore, Jacob Fatu is joint for most eliminations. Bragster gets the point,
God.
and Bragster wins 7-6 in the predictions.
Okay. Well, it's only the first month. There's a long way to go.
I'm the champion.
There's a long way to go.
I'm the champion.
There's a long way to go. To be fair, I'm happy it's just 1 point because I was worried. I couldn't remember what I'd done or said. I then got like to be 1 point in it. That's okay. If we get to the point where we get to Mania and I'm like 10 points back, I'm like I may as well call it there and just be like, you've won. Time out.
There was 1 point in the men's where, like, in my head, I was like, okay, Punk's winning the Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
I think we both thought that. And Speed came in really early on. Yeah. And I was sitting there, and at that point, I was 3 up on you.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, I'm really confident. And then Penta lasted ages. Joe Hendry and AJ Styles all came in. And I was like, oh, no. But no, Bragster wins. Bragster wins the Royal Rumble predictions.
Fair enough. I mean, I will give a quick shout out, though, because to the watching party that I was part of in Big Man on Campus's watch party, they'd set up a little predictions thing themselves, which basically you had a budget, essentially, of where you could pick a certain amount of wrestlers with, depending on how much they cost. Almost like a fantasy team sort of thing. I ended up winning that.
Hey.
And do you know why? Because I picked Penta, and I had Jey Uso in my 5. That won me it, basically. So, yeah. And I had Nia Jax as well, who got 112 points for me. So, yeah, shout out to Big Man on Campus and that crew for letting me win at least one thing this weekend. So, yeah. So, from the predictions, shall we move on to Raw and have a quick recap of that and send the viewers home satisfied with their wrestling podcast needs this week? Okay, so, start out with what were you doing there? Nothing? Okay. So, we start out with Jey Uso coming out as he does, yeeting all over the place. Crowd is loving life. Everybody's up yeeting. Even Michael on his 2 legs is able to get through it without having a cardiac arrest of some kind. So we have the promo start, kind of, because he's a bit emotional and he's struggling to get his words out, as you would expect.
Genuinely foul. Like, obviously we know it's real, but the promo just felt so real, where you were just sat there like, oh, you could just feel it. You could feel the emotion being there.
Because you've got to remember as well with Jey, he has been in this role, in this job as a wrestler for well over 15 years. And even on the main roster, he's been there for 12, if not more, I think. And I was watching a clip the other day, and it was basically he came out, I think it was 2012 Royal Rumble, and he's 24 or something like that, and he comes out and there's just nothing. Just not a peep. And it's like, to see him go from that to being one of the best tag teams we've ever seen to this is just phenomenal on its own right. So again, he's very emotional, and he's going through everything in terms of how he's feeling about the Rumble win and obviously what's coming next. And then Gunther comes out and basically says, essentially, the match doesn't appeal to him, and that he essentially refuses to fight Jey even if he picks him, because beating Jey wouldn't add to his legacy, unlike if he beat Punk or Cena or Reigns or someone like that. Jey then says he's tired of being told what he can and can't do, and that basically, whilst he might be walking into Mania as the underdog, if he faces Gunther, he will be walking in as the Royal Rumble winner. And he'll also be walking out as champion. And that's essentially the end of that little interaction. Of course, we'll see what he ends up picking, though that would heavily suggest it's probably going to be Gunther.
It will be Gunther. As tantalizing as Cody versus Jey is, the more you think about it, because of their story over the last few years. I think the entire story of Gunther getting the better of Jey, even when he was Intercontinental Champion, getting the better of Jey, and always being better than Jey. And then Jey having this moment at Saturday night's main event, being like, "Oh, I can beat you," and realizing he can beat him. Yes, he didn't, but he had that moment where he's like, "I have it in me," and then goes on to win the Rumble, which then spurs his confidence. And as he sort of hints here, he's been walking around ever since being a single star, not knowing if he can do it, always doubting whether he can do it. There's no doubt anymore. He is main event Jey Uso, and he believes that now. And that, like, it's almost like this just elevation to the character, and it will be Gunther, and rightfully so it should be Gunther. And for the second year on the bounce, Gunther's going to put over one of the biggest crowd favorites on the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was having a bit of a theorizing of are they going to do a similar build with Sammy over the next year, but then I was like, it's kind of the same story, really, so I don't think that's what they're going to do, but we'll wait and see. So after that, we had Penta versus Ludwig. Again, Ludwig trying to avenge his quick exit at the Royal Rumble over Penta, who'd thrown him out. Again, another good match for Penta. Again, like his previous couple of matches since his debut, it was a good, solid outing, and there was nothing really else to point out other than it was a great match.
I really enjoyed the cutting down of every one of Penta's aerial moves. I mentioned it earlier in the AEW section with the Brian Cage Ospreay match, but this felt very different in that he stopped the moves. He didn't just reverse them. He just he'd do a chop, or he would just take down Penta at every opportunity. Yeah. And it wasn't so much a reversal, it was just more of a stopping of offense. Yeah. Which is a very different style, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the contrast of styles of you've got very athletic versus a man that's very calculated. Yeah. And at every opportunity that Penta got to go aerial, bang, he took him down. It was forced Penta to be a bit more grounded as well, which was quite fun.
Yeah, exactly. And then we kind of got a bit of a further tease of a future partnership because Pete Dunne comes out and then basically distracts Penta after Penta's got the win. Then Ludwig attacks him. We got a bit of a tease of this last week because they were chatting in the background, and then sort of when the main promo or backstage segment happened, they sort of split, and then it went on to the next part. So again, another tease of something maybe coming with them too. We then cut back to Judgment Day, who have Finn Balor walk in after his couple of weeks of absence, basically slandering Dominic for taking his title match and for losing his partner in the process, because obviously JD McDonough is now on the shelf. Liv then, surprisingly, sticks up for Dom and says basically if it wasn't for Dom, Finn wouldn't be having a qualifying match for the Chamber, which we'll see, obviously, in the near future. And then, probably to my least favourite segment of the entire night, we had Charlotte Flair come out to a pretty cold reaction from the crowd, to be honest. There wasn't really much. Like, I was expecting a chorus of boos or maybe even a cheer as a welcome back. Kind of it was a bit cold, really. Yeah. Not really what I expected, especially when she's been out for so long. Because, Charlotte Flair, as much as there are maybe some issues I have with her as a character, and maybe being a bit one-dimensional at times, I think even so, with her history, she's someone that should still be pretty highly regarded. Yeah. But again, pretty cold reaction to how she came out. And then despite the sort of mild reaction, she said she doesn't care what the crowd does because she knows she's still the greatest. And the promo up to that point still wasn't the best work she could have done. And I think it might have been a little bit due to the reaction of the crowd. I think she might have been a little bit off-put with that, which is...
It was a weird... The thing I wrote down was it was a weird comeback from injury promo, which is usually a very babyface promo, but she's doing it in a very heelish manner. Yeah. And again, possibly because of the crowd reaction. Yeah. But it was a really weird one where you've got this reaction and what she was saying not really marrying up. Yeah. And it felt off, as you said, everything felt off. Like, similar to, me feeling that Charlotte was the right choice. Yeah. And I still felt that way. And then I watched the Raw and I watched that promo and I'm like, oh, that felt weird and odd and not right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And then after that part of saying she was still the greatest, Rhea comes out and basically tells her, "You've been away for a while, but I'm here. I have the belt, and essentially I want you to pick me so we can go at it again." Flair basically tells her to wait a turn essentially because she's going to go to NXT and SmackDown and see who impresses her more, and then basically that she'll have to wait until next week, which Rhea wasn't particularly happy about. But again, we'll see what the outcome is over the next couple of shows. And yeah, I just, like I said at the end of the Rumble, when she won the Rumble, I just didn't feel particularly bothered by the fact that Charlotte had won. And it's nothing against her as a performer or anything like that, but it just feels like we've seen her in this position so many times. Like,
Yeah.
it would be nice for her to be in a story that doesn't have to involve the title.
Yeah.
And I think that's always a problem I've had with the women's side of the wrestling equation, is that it was always booked that way by Vince, and that's why they've still got this problem, is that there's never enough storylines that are just feuds.
Mm-hmm.
It's always to get to the title. It's never about one-upping somebody or getting revenge or, having this proper feud that you have for months on end. It's always with, or one of them's going to end up getting the title and that's how it's going to finish. Like, it's never really been that way. And I just feel like, even though she's obviously won a boatload of titles in the past, I feel like people are a little bit like worn out on Flair, even though she's been away for a while.
Yeah.
Because it's like that. It was like that with Reigns when he was being booked by Vince and always getting the opportunities, always being in the title shots, always being in title matches. There comes to a certain point where you have to peel it back a bit and let them have a story or two away, and then eventually circle back.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, unfortunately, at the minute, it doesn't feel like that's going to happen. And I feel like even if Flair wasn't in these matches for the main titles, she'd probably be in for the Intercontinental, or she'd be in for the US title, and there'd be something she'd be fighting for. So, yeah, it wasn't a great segment, and I would probably say, since we started doing this and these reviews, I would probably say it's probably one of the worst I've watched so far, which wasn't great. But hopefully it picks up when she goes to NXT and SmackDown. From there, we had Zayn and congratulating Jey, and then he bumped into Cross again. So again, further teasing something for them down the line. We then had Liv and Raquel attacking Io and Rhea, which again set up the Io and Liv match a little bit later. And then you had a tag match between New Day and Rey Mysterio and Dragon Lee, with New Day's new music and entrance, which was interesting.
I like the new theme.
Okay.
I want that out there now. I like the new theme. However, I did write that it starts with their name again.
Yeah.
Like, they weirdly, spoiler alert, when they win the match, it starts without their name at the start. Like, their music plays without New Day or whatever it was, like, oh, stand for the New Day or whatever it was at the start.
Yeah.
And it was actually really good. Like, without that at the start. Yes, it says New Day within the theme, but that's fine. Like, there are certain themes that do say the wrestler's name during the theme. But there's, like, words to this theme, which is good, because we don't get a lot of those with Death Rebel. But I think if they actually just played the theme without the, like, please rise for the, or whatever it is for the New Day or whatever that's at the start of the song, they just played the song. The song's actually quite good. Like, the theme is actually quite good on its own, and I feel like it suits them really well. Just stop putting their names at the start of everything, Death Rebel, because it ruins the fact that it was a good theme, but naturally I'm annoyed at it because it's got that at the start.
Yeah. I mean, I think there were reports a while back that Death Rebel don't have very long left, so I think there will be some change coming soon to the themes, at least, especially when it comes to name repetition. So yeah, so like you mentioned before, New Day picked up the win. The most I don't know what the word is, the thing to talk about in this match, I guess, is the fact that Logan Paul came out in the middle of the match in the middle of his hometown of Cleveland to rapturous applause, I'm sure, because he's got a qualifying match with Rey Mysterio for Elimination Chamber next week, which he's probably going to end up winning, much to my dismay.
He'll end up in the chamber. He'll do some flippy stuff in the chamber and do some cool moves or whatever.
Probably draw on the side of it again, which was great, apparently.
I'm not going to lie, I did kind of enjoy that last year.
Great. And then basically Ray and Logan square up in the middle of the match and Ray shoves him over, to which then, as the referee's distracted, Logan then attacks and New Day get the win. So we'll see how next week pans out. Spoiler alert, it's probably Logan that wins. Next up, you had EO versus Liv, which I thought was probably match of the week for me, if you take the TV shows. It was a great match for me up until the end, where there was a little bit of typical Monday Night Raw hijinks, and Liv won by DQ because Raquel got attacked by Rhea, who then attacked Liv, and Liv then gets into the Elimination Chamber match, which did surprise me, because I was kind of like, oh, well, this is how EO gets in the match, and you go from there. But obviously, there's a little bit more of a road to travel before we get to that point, ladies and gentlemen.
It's a really clever way of building to what I think everyone's predicting, which is the eventual EO Sky versus Rhea Ripley match at Mania.
Yeah.
But it adds that extra wrinkle because EO's getting frustrated. Rhea also looks like the bad guy because she keeps getting involved and keeps costing people, and it's a really clever and different way of building to it, because obviously the crowd love them both. So it's kind of interesting that it's going to be more of they have a problem with each other rather than this is the bad guy, this is the good guy. It's going to be, no, these two just have a problem with each other. They just don't get along.
Yeah.
No matter what the crowd opinion is.
Yeah. And thank you for ruining my segue. Because I said, from on this long road we have to WrestleMania, and speaking of long roads to WrestleMania, Chad Gable announces he's going on a long road of a quest to learn the art of lucha libre, which will be very interesting to see, because I really want this to be a weekly package where we see him getting trained by some form of legend, whether it's JBL, Kurt Angle, somebody, just make it a weekly thing and have it build to him facing someone at Mania, because I think that would be great. So yeah, that was Chad Gable's segment of the week. AJ Styles gets announced as being on Raw. Braun Breaker comes in and says, "What's going on with me? Because there's nothing happening. It's like you don't appreciate this title anymore." And then they go away and have a discussion with Adam Pearce. So we'll see where that leads. AJ Braun for the Intercontinental title. Wouldn't mind that myself personally, but that's just me. He might break AJ though with that spear. I am concerned by that.
Yes.
The way AJ is feeling at the minute. And then you had Seth Rollins dressed up as a very black leather-plaid cowboy.
Yes.
As he does. Shouts out Jay for winning the Rumble. Says he loves the fact that Punk's future is uncertain heading into Mania, because he obviously didn't want Punk to win the Rumble. And then he moves on to Roman and says, "I'm going to tell you the truth. Basically, Roman might not make it to Mania because of what I did to him. And ain't that a shame, essentially." Says he's got the qualifying match against Finn coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then he asks Sami Zayn, of all people, to come out and basically gives him the pep talk of a lifetime and says, "I know what a lot of people don't know, and how much you hate CM Punk. This is your time now. Go do it. Go beat Punk." And then you have Punk and Zayn to end the show. And again, continuing the trend of main events of Monday Night Raw over the past month, of finishing it in style. And again, a great match. And again, didn't have a weird finish at the end like Io and Liv did. It was a great match. Punk really working Zayn's arm, which was mainly the story of the match, of trying to really damage Zayn's arm, getting him into Anaconda Vice. Is it? Or is it? I keep saying grip, but it's not. It's Vice. And yeah, it was just a great match, and Punk got the win in the end, as I expected him to. And then they shook hands, so maybe a bit of respect was earned there from Zayn and Punk. Because again, during the match, Punk went, "There's levels to this," and doing this, relating to the promo you had a few weeks ago where he was saying that Zayn's not on his level. And then, as Raw's about to sign off and Punk's about to get out the ring,
I just want to mention...
No.
Okay.
You're not allowed. No, go on.
I just wanted to especially mention the last 5 minutes of this match being one of the best things I've ever seen. From the Zayn missing the haluva kick to it going into a GTS that was then reversed into a small package, that then they got up and started brawling. Then a GTS was reversed into an exploder suplex, which then set up the haluva kick, which was then put into a GTS for the 1-2-3. Just like the fast pace of that last 5 minutes was just awesome. I wanted to especially just mention that just because I think that the wrestling between them two was just incredible.
Yeah. And
but yes,
again,
it leads into the end. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, on to that point, Brexit. If you gave me more of Punk and Zayn, I don't think I'd complain. And again, all these main events that we've had in the Raw since we started reviewing them, I think each match I would be like, give me more of that, please. Which is kind of perfect. That's what you want, really.
It reminds me of back in the day, Raws and Smackdowns, where you would the weekly shows had the big main events, but they weren't what Vince always thought was that he was wasting the big matches. No, by showing that they've got great chemistry, it means that next time around, when the next time I see Punk and Zayn face each other, which might not be for another 6, 7, 8 months.
Yeah, it could be a while, yeah.
It could be a really long time, but the next time I see it, I'm going to be like, oh, I remember how good this was last time. And you get excited for it. And it doesn't even need a build for me to get excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, Punk's going to walk off, Zayn stood in the ring, and then KO in his half-broken body appears and shoves Zayn into Punk, who tumbles out the ring, and then package pile drives Zayn into the canvas. So leaving Zayn sprawled out in the ring, and with KO looking at him in the corner as a broken man after that ladder match. And again, like we mentioned about the Rumble and how it ended with Roman and Seth and Punk and them three sort of shouting and pointing fingers and fighting each other, this leads us to question what happens next with KO and Zayn and looking to see what happens next. Because again, with a package pile driver and with KO broken in bits, there's a good chance we don't see either of them for at least a little while. If they wanted to leave it.
Bear in mind that the Elimination Chamber's in Canada.
Yeah.
In their hometown. And I think Owens will appear at it. What I can see happening is there being some sort of talk show segment and Owens is involved and Zayn interrupts. Mm-hmm. And that's the first time we see Zayn after. But what I would love is the whole build to that being Owens being like, Zayn ain't going to be there because I'm taking him out sort of thing. And yeah, just this descent into madness for Owens is just a brilliant story that they're telling.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's going to be another underdog story for Zayn to come up through, which is exactly where he excels. So again, another KO Zayn match. It ain't something I'm going to complain about. So that was Raw. Again, overall, thought the show was pretty good. I think it was better again than last week, because last week was the typical build-up to the Rumble. I'm declaring for the Rumble. No, I'm declaring for the Rumble. No, I'm going to win. No, I'm going to win. Whilst this had storyline elements left, right, and centre and had things to build off going into the next few shows. So, yeah, we'll obviously see who qualifies next week in the qualifiers and what other storyline developments we get. And fingers crossed, Rey Mysterio pulls one out the bag and beats Logan Paul.
No, he doesn't.
But with that being said,
it's time.
It's time for Bragster's favourite segment of the week.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is. Taking the pins. Wrestler of the Week.
Great.
We haven't had a double winner yet, either.
No.
There's been many different winners, ranging from Powerhouse Hobbs to JD McDonough to Kevin Owens. But who is going to be your Wrestler of the Week this week, Grimmy? Remember, it's not just about the matches; it's about the whole picture of the week.
I'm going to go KO again.
Woo!
I just think after that ladder match and the near-death experience that man's had, I don't think I can give it to anyone else, really.
No, I completely understand, and especially with that angle on Raw as well. Just like the development of KO's character is just incredible at the moment. So our first double winner in Kevin Owens. And mine is finally, after weeks, finally going to be our first female on the list.
Charlotte Flair.
Absolutely not. It is going to be Roxanne Perez. I feel like that just entire performance of the Rumble, in fairness, the entire time we've done this, I've never once ended a match and gone, yeah, they've won Wrestler of the Week. I finished that match and immediately my brain went, and Roxanne's won it. I just, in that moment, just immediately, I hadn't even gotten to the men's one. And I was like, I don't think anyone in that men's Rumble could perform the way Roxanne just did for that entire Rumble. You go into that not expecting Roxanne to be the Iron Woman. She does. You go into that expecting Roxanne to probably get eliminated by Bayley. She doesn't. You don't expect Roxanne to get to the final four. And she does. You definitely don't expect her to get to the final two. And she does. And the entirety of that Rumble and she had multiple moments of showcasing her stuff. Many different stare downs. And alongside all of that, you got this ongoing storyline with Bayley. Roxanne Perez deserves all the flowers, especially this week.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And two deserved winners, as always. I don't think we've had one where we've looked at each other and gone, really? So, thankfully, we still agree on that one. And with that being said, folks, that will be it for this week's podcast. So, again, if you've enjoyed it, I hope so anyway, if you've made it to the end. If you've made it to here and you haven't enjoyed it, you are a sadist and you are a man or lady of torture. But if you have enjoyed it, please consider subscribing or following wherever you're listening, whether it's on YouTube or on the usual podcast places like Spotify, Apple, all those places. And leave a comment as well and a rating if you wouldn't mind. And let us know what you thought of the Rumble and who your Wrestler of the Week is. And with that being said, we shall sign off and we shall see you on the next one where we will continue the build to Elimination Chamber, folks. See you there.